After all, I'm your #1 fan.
My fan?
The biggest.
The first Bat-Mite episode. Legends of the Dark Mite is an episode absolutely chock full of references in history, as well as meta-commentary on some of the criticisms the show Batman Brave and the Bold was fending off at the time. It's a unique experience that manages to have a lot of fun, and encompass the character of Bat-Mite in his entirety. Almost. At least as he'd appeared since Silver Age to reintroduction. Bat-Mite in this series exists as he did in the Silver Age, as an imp from the 5th dimension. Although initially when he first debuted in comics, the dimension wasn't named. It would be applied afterwards. It was just another dimension. The series, however, adds another layer, making the character a bit of a meta presence, someone with knowledge outside the narrative. In this case of Batman lore, the TV series, and the fandom. So there's a lot at play to balance, and this episode does it well, straddling the line between fun and irritating, while seemingly embracing the fact that some people are just gonna find Bat-Mite annoying, but finding a way to make that work with the story's narrative, because in ways he's meant to be irritating, so that can be used to the story's advantage. Batman finds him annoying, so the viewer is meant to as well, just not too much. You gotta walk that tightrope. Does this episode stick the landing? Well, let's take a look and find out. Legends of the Dark Mite was the 19th episode of the first season of Batman the Brave and the Bold. It initially aired in May of 2009. It was written by Paul Dini of Batman the Animated Series acclaim and directed by Ben Jones. The title of the episode is more than a play on the phrase Legends of the Dark Knight, which was a comic series that ran a few times. It's had a few iterations. The first and most iconic was launched in 1989, following the success of the Tim Burton Batman film. It was a more gritty series, at least at the start. And also at its beginning, it consisted of short series arcs that took place early in Batman's career, and the series would reintroduce some characters, that being post-Crisis on Infinite Earths, which occurred in 1985. The initial run was from 1989 to 2007, so it also went through Infinite Crisis. Now sometimes, or oft times, when characters were reintroduced, they would have different backstories or some tweaks made, and Bat-Mite was one of the characters reintroduced in this series. While Bat-Mite had debuted in Detective Comics 267 in 1959, which we covered in a video on this channel in detail, link below, he was phased out in 1964 by editor Julius Schwartz. 1964 was when he took over as Batman editor with the task to revitalize the at the time flagging Bat books. So he revamped the look, took away a bunch of characters, kind of changed the direction. Bat-Mite was one of the elements that was deemed too silly, and so shelved. Although he would pop up a few times pre-Crisis, it wasn't until Legends of the Dark Knight, that series, when he was brought back. This in issue 38, in the one-shot called Legend of the Dark Mite. So that's where we're pulling the name from. It was written by Alan Grant with art by Kevin O'Neill. While this issue paid many respects to Bat-Mite's first comic appearance, it even pulled some lines from it directly, it also played with the idea that Bat-Mite could also have been a drug-induced hallucination, flirting with the whole maybe he's not real element. But it was done in such a way that it was clear that he was. There was this last panel where he was there behind Batman, even though the person who was supposed to be hallucinating him was locked up. But it was done in such a way that if one wanted to dismiss Bat-Mite as still too silly or from a bygone era, you could do that. It was kinda open, which was also what was done in Batman R.I.P. by Grant Morrison during the whole Zur-En-Arrh updates, which we've also talked about on this channel. This was the era when Zur-En-Arrh went from an alien to an alternate personality of Batman. It was 2008. Bat-Mite was there during this, presented as a hallucination of Batman, but also not. The door was kind of left open that maybe he is real because the 5th dimension is imagination. But those explanations wouldn't last, and eventually he would just be brought back fully as an imp from the 5th dimension. Once it was deemed okay to embrace the silly of the Silver Age without having to edgify it or make it more realistic. Just let it exist as was, but inside of the different comic framework. So from the name of this episode already, one can see there's a lot in play. The teaser features Batman and Ace, the Bat Hound, another Silver Age creation phased out for being too silly, versus Catman. It's fun, but doesn't directly tie into the episode, outside of the fact that Ace is also in the main story. The main story starts off with a bank being robbed, but as they're finishing up, narration kicks in, saying that Batman has arrived, which Batman assumes they said, but they didn't.
I don't need a play-by-play.
I didn't say anything.
Batman is just used to his villains being weird. He probably just thought he had a new one called the Narrator. This opening scene, while it doesn't directly adapt Detective Comics 267, does take some of the plot elements. Namely that Bat-Mite starts to intervene and change things because he wants it to be more exciting. In the comic, it's because Batman is just plowing through the villains too fast, so he needs to up the stakes and make things longer. In this, it's because the villains just give up right away because they know they're outclassed.
Look, it ain't me doing this!
I think I believe you.
Because of this, Bat-Mite starts to take control of them, actually forcing them to fight Batman. And then when that still doesn't work, he starts buffing them. More goons, bigger guns, and then he just turns them into ninjas, because that's cool. Or is it? Gangsters with Tommy guns versus ninjas with swords. What's cooler? Is that just a cool fight in general? Batman is understandably put out, and so Bat-Mite reveals himself, stating he's Batman's biggest fan. This is also something he stated as his motivation in his first appearance, but there was also the element that he wanted to help, he wanted to join their team. In this iteration, they play more with the aspects of modern age fandom. From modern age, we're going to use from the 1960s onward with the evolution of zine culture, transformative fandom, those kind of things, cons, all of that. This Bat-Mite just wants to be in Batman's presence, just to be with his idol, and in this case has the imp/Q powers to make it happen. It's very Trelane playing with Kirk and the Enterprise crew. The extended universe stuff where Trelane is a Q. I approve.
Beings from my realm have powers that you 3Ds take for magical.
A friend of mine in Metropolis told me about menaces like you.
Part of what makes this episode work is how well it straddles the dynamic between annoying fan and character. It handles that element without pushing it over the edge or being mean-spirited or too targeted, at least in the case of Bat-Mite, because he is a character, which lends a layer of distance to certain commentaries being made. It'll be more pointed in a moment, but first, Bat-Mite starts playing with the type of Batman he wants, examining different costumes.
What's wrong with my costume?
It's all wrong.
Here, Bat-Mite transforms Batman into different iterations he's had through time, and they're pretty eclectic. The first is from what is now known as the Batman Dracula trilogy, which began with the first story, Red Rain. But the full new look that's seen here in costume, it comes from the sequel Bloodstorm, which went hard, but the art in those is great. Red Rain was released in 1991, while the sequel, Bloodstorm, came out in 1994, and the finale, Crimson Mist, hard to say. Crimson Mist came in 1998. All three were by Doug Mensch and had art by Kelly Jones. John Beatty inked the second two, with Malcolm Jones III doing the first. The next costume is Bat-Ombre, who debuted in Batman 56 in 1948, and was not Bruce Wayne, but Luis Peralta, who was actually a criminal pretending to be a vigilante. Batman did pose as Bat-Ombre briefly in that issue, though. The next one is the one that causes confusion, meaning different sources will tell you different things. Some will say that it's the 1989 Batman costume, but there are too many differences for that. The ears are too short, there aren't enough details on the costume. To me, it looks closer to the new look era of Batman from 1964, when Schwartz took over as editor, with the shortened ears, the yellow emblem around the bat symbol, the eyebrows. So it's very much like the Adam West costume, and Bat-Mite also refers to it as campy. There's the POW transition, it has the bat symbol on the belt, which the new look didn't pre-TV series, but that one evolved from the new look, which is why I mentioned it. The one it transitions into is the Joel Schumacher era bat costumes from Batman Forever and Batman and Robin. People will forever make fun of those nipples. The next one is Zebra Batman from Detective Comics 275 from 1960, when Batman gets Zebra Man's power set, and he ends up repelling solid matter. What? Is that not what you thought Zebra Man's powers would be? Or that he would have powers at all? Because he does. The last in this sequence is the Dark Knight Returns series Batman by Frank Miller from 1986. So it was a wide array here. After getting him to stop messing with his costume, Batman tries to convince Bat-Mite that he really needs to fight crime. That's what he should be doing, but this just encourages Bat-Mite to start throwing a bunch of his villains at him. He can't decide, so he's picking a bunch of heavy hitters until Batman tricks him into picking Calendar Man.
Batman? But how? I hadn't even begun my new holiday crime spree.
I'll explain later. Take a dive.
This seems to work until Bat-Mite decides to even the odds by turning Calendar Man to Calendar King, which has sadly not happened to him in comics. He wishes. Calendar Man is often depicted as a second stringer. Post-Crisis, he had a bit of a resurgence with the long Halloween and all of that and the different depiction, but then they kind of slipped back into he's one of the loser Batman villains. He certainly couldn't do things like he does in this, like summon biker Santas and giant jack-o'-lanterns. It's in the sequence where he summons some killer Easter bunnies that one of the things that this episode is remembered for occurs, which is that we get a flash to Bat-Mite going to a convention to ask, is this too far? Is this too silly? This is a more direct reference and response to some of the fan scrutiny that was happening in certain corners regarding this series, with the chief complaint being that it wasn't portraying Batman correctly. It was too silly. It was betraying the ethos, the core of the character.
I always felt Batman was best suited in the role of gritty urban crime detective, but now you guys have him up against Santas and Easter bunnies? I'm sorry. That's not my Batman.
That's not my Batman. If you've been in fandom, it's very likely you've heard this or maybe even said it. Maybe not about Batman, maybe about some other character, but it is something that floats around. It's a familiar sentiment and it sometimes can be accurate, other times not. It varies. The depiction of the convention, it's tongue-in-cheek and meant to be humorous. While I think it doesn't go too far, some may find this segment mean-spirited. For unlike Bat-Mite, this is a depiction of fandom itself, or rather a segment of it. While some may chuckle at things like the absurdity of everyone dressed as Batman down to the Bat Baby maybe. Some may feel that this is meant to be a bit of a jab at fandom and fans just being too into it. Although it must be noted that there are some fans who can be too into it, but also that doesn't negate that some fan criticisms are very accurate. Again, nuance. It also must be noted that this sequence isn't meant to be addressing Batman fandom in general, but this specific fan concern. As Bat-Mite is given the statement to respond, basically saying that there are many ways to interpret the Dark Knight.
Batman's rich history allows him to be interpreted in a multitude of ways. To be sure, this is a lighter incarnation, but it's certainly no less valid and true to the character's roots.
This is especially true with this series because nothing is being pulled from thin air. This show is steeped in references. It's just that it's to an era that is more often mined for cheap laughs than for the depth and breadth of its history. Also, this series fuses a lot of things together from different eras too. There's a lot of love. But we're not done with the references from this faux convention panel. People on the panel are artistic depictions of people who are working on the show. You have Andrea Romano, Diedrich Bader, Michael Chang, Ben Jones, Brandon Vietti, Michael Jelinek, James Tucker, and Sam Register. So that's a nice touch. Paul Dini, who wrote the episode, and Bruce Timm, also a Batman TAS, make cameos dressed as the Joker and Harley Quinn, so the only non-Batmen. This also isn't Dini's only cameo as Harley in animation. It's a nice touch since he is her co-creator and was instrumental in how the character initially evolved. This scene is interesting, and using Bat-Mite to address these concerns, it works, as given his power set it makes sense within the episode, and the complaint is one that's so relatable to fandom that even though it is specific to this series, it still works years later, or just for one who wouldn't have been aware of those complaints. It's one of the smoother attempts at directly addressing fandom out there, and it's not an attack, more a plea to give it a chance. Outside of just not addressing it at all, it's probably the best way it could have been handled in continuity.
Okay then, mutant bunnies are a go!
After defeating the admittedly cool mutant bunnies, Batman seemingly convinces Bat-Mite to leave. Only he hasn't. This is another staple of Bat-Mite stories, that he's actually secretly hanging around still. We also get a more direct reference to the first Bat-Mite appearance.
Hey, Bats. Did you hear this weird little voice kinda heckling you?
No.
In Detective Comics 267, Batman was obsessed with making sure that the criminals didn't see anything suspicious about what was going on around them. But instead of just not answering like he does in this episode, he made up elaborate lies, like the idea that there are chemicals being put in the water. It was pretty funny. Bat-Mite is still around, and he hears what Batman really thinks of him.
Spend most of it dealing with a weird little creep from another dimension.
Which is that he's an annoying creep, and this angers him and shows the more dangerous side of Bat-Mite, which is there. He takes Batman to the fifth dimension.
If you won't be my hero, then you'll be my toy. And just like a toy, I'll play with you until you break!
The fifth dimension, they've added a lot of sci-fi elements to, and references galore. Here, Bat-Mite wants Batman to fight a variety of monsters. And I found them, and I'm gonna name them for you. I was pretty sure they were all references as soon as I saw the rainbow monster, and I recognized a couple of the others, and I was like, let's go, let's do this. Facts, because we can, because it's fun. The rainbow creature is from Batman 134. The monster on fire is the time creature from World's Finest 107, The Secret of the Time Creature. The secret involved time travel. It's a way more convoluted story than you would expect from looking at this giant lava monster, but they had to go back in time to ancient Greece to get a device that was left there for them by aliens to defeat that alien. The green one with the red stripe is from World's Finest 112. It was a creature that Superman adopted as a pet because it was so cute. Then he fed after midnight. Kidding. It transformed when it was feeling angry, and you wouldn't like it when it was angry. That comic was from 1960. It predates the Hulk, who was 1962, but let's not kid ourselves. The Hulk is just Jekyll and Hyde, but with gamma ray science. In one shot, you can see the legs of the creature from World's Finest 110, the alien who doomed Robin. Just legs though, he doesn't get full screen time. This giant mechanical thing is the crime robot from World's Finest 113, which was the issue where Bat-Mite met Mr. Mxyzptlk. Batman and Robin are fighting some crooks inside the crime robot at the start, and it seems that their talents have been misplaced because they can make a whole crime robot, but I digress. The hairy Cyclops purple monster is also from this issue. Mixie creates it to try to prove Batman will have to call Superman for help. Him and Bat-Mite are having a whole ooh, who's better kind of contest. The purple tongue thing is Anthkar from World's Finest 114. It attacked Batman, Superman, and Robin on the planet Zoran. It's only in a few panels. It's a deep cut. These chain germ looking things, they're stars, and they're from World's Finest 108. I see Paul Dini or somebody on the art staff read a lot of world's finest, and I appreciate it. So these star things were robots made by an alien film producer who wanted to make the greatest action movie and made them to fight Batman, Superman, and Robin. You also briefly see Kalex, aka the alien Superman from World's Finest 105, a criminal who Superman keeps a picture of in his trophy room after he captured him. He's so gloating as he looks at it too, it's funny. This episode is just stacked with references. It's nerd heaven, and I'm probably missing some. In fact, I know I am. This green dragon, where is it from? I found some that were almost there, but not it specifically, and they foreground it so many times. But all the ones I found were slightly off. Spine scales, no wings, but many had the popped out eyes. That was a look. So if any of you know where this one was from specifically, please let me know. It's haunting me. Maybe it is just a mishmash, but I want to know. Batman decides that, you know what, enough is enough. The only way to win is not to play. So he stops and says if Bat-Mite wants to do it so badly, he can be Batman. The Batman costume with the tiny Bat-Mite head is mwah, chef's kiss. Now it's Batman's turn to set up a scenario, and there's a brief nod to the intro of Batman TAS.
This is awesome sauce.
The encounter with Gorilla Grodd goes okay. There's another reference here where Bat-Mite turns himself into an ape, which looks a bit like Bat-Ape or Mogo from Batman 114. He was an ape who briefly allied with the dynamic duo. The Silver Age loved apes, and you know what? It works. Every time I put an ape or a gorilla in a poll, it does really well. There's something there. Remember in that Wonder Woman story we did live where all of a sudden just randomly a giant ape showed up and then Steve Trevor defeated it with judo? Good times. As for Bat-Mite, the concept of being Batman proves too much for him, and he starts to get overwhelmed, conjuring up a slew of Batman villains, which is a fun time, and some of them would have been more obscure when this episode aired, like the Polka Dot Man. Thanks to the Suicide Squad, he's less obscure time of recording, but for many people, this would have been their first time seeing some of these characters, like Tweedledee and Tweedledum, or the Mr. Zero version of Mr. Freeze, light brunette Two-Face. They play with different animations here, and even end up in a very surreal landscape as Bat-Mite is chased, which is very reminiscent of the style of the drug hallucinations shown in Legend of the Dark Mite from 1992. Drug hallucination in quotes. He totally really went there. The surreal imagery is also a bit more focused because they center it around Batman's villains, and some of those are references, like the Joker house is from Detective Comics 365, the house the Joker built, a story where Joker gets mad about the success of Batman merch and tries to undercut his sales. I love petty Joker stories. They're so good. There's also an homage to this Riddler cover from Detective Comics 140 with Bat-Mite trapped in the puzzle rather than Batman and Robin. This was actually the first Riddler appearance. This whole sequence is just a lot of fun. It has the spirit of most Bat-Mite stories where it's just going for it. There's also a nod to Jaws as Tiger Shark rises from the ocean made from Polka Dot Man's blue dot.
Oh no, it's Tiger Shark!
The whole scene's just fun and chaotic, but a controlled chaos. A highlight in an episode full of strong moments. Also, there's something about how they drew Mr. Zero. He's genuinely menacing and freaking me out. Bat-Mite has lost control of his mind, but Batman jumps in to help, and seeing his hero in action gives him the confidence to take control, take it back over the landscape of the fifth dimension, so he makes them all vanish. Batman is able to cheer him up and try to encourage him to forge his own path, and not just follow in his footsteps. Heartened, Bat-Mite vanishes to go off and bother Green Arrow. Oh, it's another ending on a joke about Green Arrow. You know I love that. End of episode. This is a very strong outing and brings together so many elements. It's a shining example of what makes this series work, and the chief thing among many reasons is just a deep love of Batman and knowledge and willingness to use many aspects of his lore across eras and mediums. So many deep cuts. It's so fun, but they're utilized in such a way that even if you aren't aware of them, they still work. They don't stick out or not fit. It also even dares to try and address critique in a fun way. Bat-Mite is extremely well realized in this iteration, and the addition of the more modern connotations of fan to him work well. Paul Reubens provides an excellent, annoying yet enthused voice that matches the character to a T. It's the type of episode that's just fun to watch, and if you know more about Batman lore, it's just a treat. All that useless Batman knowledge, it wasn't for nothing. Now, of course, like everything, this won't be for everyone. Some find Bat-Mite too annoying to the point of unbearable, and if that's the case, then this will not be a fun episode for them. Some don't like meta references or breaks or just too many Easter eggs. If so, this episode may also be tiring. And as mentioned, some may not like that they address the fan criticism at all. This episode knows what it wants to be and crafts itself around that concept with precision, humor, and a lot of love for the Dark Knight, while not taking him too seriously, but acknowledging his gravitas at the same time. It's walking quite the tightrope and putting on a heck of a show while doing so. I'm sure there may have been some references I missed. If I did, you know what to do. Put them down below. I want to hear about them. It's fun. Sharing is caring. You have no idea how excited I was scripting the monster section. Some of them were already listed. Some of them weren't. Some of them were a hunt. I had a good time. What do you think of this episode? Do you like it? Do you not like it? Do you entirely disagree? I think it's a hodgepodge and a mess. How do you feel about the concept of not my Batman? Because it can be true. At what point does it become true? Or do you think it's impossible? What do you think of Bat-Mite's evolution? I think that's enough questions. Leave your answers down below. While you're down there, please do all YouTube things. Like, share, comment, subscribe, hit that bell notification so that you never miss a vid. Thanks so much for taking this Saturday to spend discussing comics with me. I always appreciate it, and I will see you again soon. Bye-bye.